We need to talk about this whole Dungeons and Dragons is dead, Dungeons and Dragons is over, all of these videos that are popping up talking about the downfall of Dungeons and Dragons. It makes me think of that quote, "The rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated." That is 100% what is happening here. And I understand it's sometimes happening just because angry content or negative content is what sells. It's what gets views, which is why all of these thumbnails exist. And if you hear me out, just listen to the video. I will explain why it's nonsense and counter some of the points that they mention in all of these videos. And let me say, this isn't attacking any of these people. I watch most of their content. We just don't see eye to eye on this. I want to start by saying I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons in the in-between, right? I wasn't playing it in the 80s and the 90s. I was playing it in the very early 2000s when I was like 13. So 2003, 2004 is when I started to discover it. I've played it in a shed. I've played it in people's houses. I've played it at comic book shops. I've played it online. I've been a part of both sides of these arguments about it becoming digitized, how they're forcing us online, which is a point we'll get into a little bit later in this video. So the first point I'm going to talk about is all of the discussion happening around the fact that the books aren't living up to what people thought they would in terms of sales. This is a weird thing because they actually sold a lot of books. And another point that a lot of people seem to just be completely missing in these discussions is how many people are using D&D Beyond now and just buying the books there versus buying a hardcover, and people are comparing these numbers as if they're not, even though the numbers now are actually better than 2014. To be clear, the 2024 Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook sold more in 1 month than the 2014 did in 2 years. And that was comparing only the English language version of the 2024 to all languages of 2014. And it's funny because that tweet from Mike Merles that was like pointing out that it's not ranking as high on the bestsellers list, it didn't rank as high, but then he ignored every comment underneath that was like, but this doesn't show D&D Beyond, right? This isn't including D&D Beyond, right? Because it basically makes the whole point of his post completely invalid. I mean, you're just completely ignoring the modern market and how people are accessing Dungeons and Dragons to prove a point. So the whole idea that nobody's buying it is absurd. The next topic is that everything's a D&D killer. You have Draw Steel coming out to be a hero-focused combat game. You have Daggerheart coming out to be more social-focused with a different die system. You have Shadowdark that certainly scratches an itch and more. And they're all great in their own right. But the chances that people are going to start with those versus coming first through Dungeons & Dragons are slim to none. Dungeons & Dragons is king. They are king right now. And I understand a lot of people want them to be dethroned, but I don't know that all of these games coming out at roughly the same time frame is actually going to be great, because what happens when a bunch of things in the same niche come out around the same time? They cannibalize each other. And guess what? D&D has the meat to survive that. Some of these other games might not. If people have to choose between playing one TTRPG that just came out versus another, then both of those parties get less. Going back to the point about most people start with D&D, D&D is something that lets people expand out into other TTRPGs. People get into TTRPGs so often through Dungeons and Dragons. With all of the videos about how it's dead, about how it's dying, about how Hasbro needs to be shut down, I don't think people realize that in a way they're promoting people not getting into it. Let's be real here. These other games that I've mentioned don't have a Netflix partnership for a TV show. They didn't have a big movie come out. They don't have these massive actual plays. They don't have Baldur's Gate, and they don't have Stranger Things. And those are the things that are bringing people in to tabletop role-playing. I understand Hasbro has done things that people don't like, and Wizards has done things that people don't like, but D&D isn't going anywhere. It's not dying. Seeing all of this content built around the idea that it's dead and dying and all of that, it just doesn't make any sense when you actually look at things. I'm all for pushing new games from creators and people that you like and you support and you enjoy their systems. I love that. You should keep doing that. I just don't think it has to be done at the expense of talking about this thing that we've all loved for so long as if it's awful, as if it's dead or dying or any of that stuff. They're not forcing you online. Them moving towards D&D Beyond is not forcing you to do anything, because they're still selling you the books. You still can buy the books and you can play it the way that you want in person with paper. But what they're doing is making themselves future-proof. The modern generation, the people who were born 5 to 10 to 15 years after me, I'm 33, are most likely playing online. And I'll add, they are far more used to subscription-based services like paying for something like D&D Beyond. I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying they're more accustomed to these types of models. I prefer playing in person. I think it is better. But with the sheer number of people that are now into Dungeons and Dragons and therefore tabletop role-playing games, which is great, it's the most it has ever been, many of them can't play in person, or they would prefer to play online. This is good for the genre. Them building a more robust system that supports the current world that we live in does not mean that they're stopping you from playing the way that you want with the tools you want. I have the books, the hardback books. I have 3.5 books, I have a Hackmaster book, I have a Star Wars RPG book. I have all of those things. I've been in those places. I've played that way, and I've played in a modern way with an iPad for my character sheet so I can quickly look up spells and abilities. And I didn't feel like I was cheating on the game by doing that. And you shouldn't either. And you shouldn't make people feel like they're cheating because they're playing the game as it modernizes. That doesn't mean you lose the old system. It doesn't mean that you have to play online. It just means that people all around the world with different situations than you or I can play Dungeons and Dragons with people from all over the world. The best friend who moved across the country can now play with their same group using the internet, using D&D Beyond, using Foundry or Roll20, and that's beautiful. But that could probably be a whole different video. So for right now, we're sticking to the fact that D&D is not dead. It's not going anywhere, at least not anytime soon. They're still making deals for TV shows that could turn into a whole cinematic universe, according to them, depending on how well it does. There's a lot of hope for Dungeons and Dragons. There's still more being done, being built around it, a whole new virtual tabletop that will bring in even more people because it gives people who need the graphics, they need more to that. It will give them something that gives them the entryway into D&D. And then maybe from there, they join somebody at a table, go to a local shop and play. All of these are possibilities. And I wish we would stop shutting them down versus looking at them as new opportunities to bring new people into this hobby that we all love so much. Dungeons and Dragons is amazing. Many other TTRPGs are also amazing. And they don't have to hate each other. I feel like we're at this point where everybody, when they're coming up with a new game or they believe in a new system, it's just to trash on Dungeons and Dragons. You don't have to do that. You can have people come in and learn through Dungeons and Dragons, and then maybe at a point they want to try something different and new. I think that's much easier than walking up to somebody and be like, hey, do you want to play in my XYZ campaign of some game they've never heard of? With so many people learning about Dungeons and Dragons through these mediums that I mentioned before, like Stranger Things and actual plays and Baldur's Gate 3, Dungeons and Dragons is their doorway into this world, and we need to welcome them. And that's all I'm saying. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed this. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving this video a thumbs up so you get more from me and your algorithm. And if you want to support me as a one-man media outlet, you can check out my website at nerdcore.gg, where I cover nerd culture things like Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, video games, comic books, and more. And if you want to support me monetarily in the best ways, become a member here on YouTube or check me out over on Patreon or buy some merch that I have down below. Some cool stuff there. Thank you so much. And until next time, good luck in your adventures.